This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
The day after the Eagles take a hold of the NFC East and nobody's satisfied. But seriously, how could you be? Josh Hennig here, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. A lot of football to get to this hour. Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports joins us coming up at 6:20 to talk some NFL, a little college football as well. Get some perspective from Eric on everything that happened over the weekend. Of course, Monday Night Football tonight. Tom Brady and the Buccaneers play the New York Football Giants. Coverage begins at 7:30 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. The Play Sugar House text board is open, 609-403-0973. I'm sorry to disappoint the audience to listening to the Sports Bash, but I have no good dog walking, pooping on the lawn stories for you. So you're stuck with other topics with me because I currently don't have a dog, and I don't even think I'm home enough to actually be a responsible pet owner anyway. So there you go. But what I will talk about is the Eagles' win in what was probably one of the worst performances in a win I've ever seen by an Eagles offensive team, at least in the last 25 years. You know, maybe there was a point in time when someone like Ty Detmer or Bobby Hoying was out there. Maybe it was that bad and they happened to win a game. Or, you know, maybe there was a time when Jim McMahon was playing for the Eagles back in the early 90s and, you know, maybe the Eagles defense had like 10 sacks in a game before Reggie left to go to Green Bay because God told him to go to Green Bay. You all remember that. And the reason I'm focusing specifically on the quarterback is because I do recall, you know, my memory might not be perfect, but I feel like it's good enough to remember that on Sports Bash Saturday, Deshaun and I were having a long conversation about Carson Wentz. And there was a bunch of people who texted in saying that we were too hard on Carson Wentz and that, you know, we were haters and this and that just because we were being critical of the guy. And honestly, today, I don't feel so bad about being labeled on those things as I did in the moment. You know, 2 days later, I don't feel so bad about critiquing Carson Wentz. I don't feel so bad about complaining about the fact that he stares down receivers, doesn't go through his reads, tries to play hero ball, has a huge ego, thinks he can make every throw. I don't feel so bad. You know why? Because that's exactly what he did on Sunday Night Football. There is no reason why anyone in their right mind, I don't care if you played quarterback in Pee Wee football or high school football or in college football. I don't care if you played only QB in Madden. The only reason why you make some of those throws is because you think that you are so wonderful and you think your talent is so elite and you think you're so much better than everybody else that you can make those throws. On throws, they had the stat on the broadcast last night. Carson Wentz, on plays where he threw the ball over 20 yards down the field, he was 0 for 3 with 2 interceptions. I don't think that's a coincidence. By the way, on the throws that he didn't make over 20 yards, he was hitting on 62.5%, which is about 3 percentage points higher than his season average. So literally, if the guy would have played within himself, if the guy would have not wanted to be a hero and made the hero play with his huge ego because he knows he could make the throw, he wouldn't have had 2 interceptions. There is no way you can tell me today that anything I said on Saturday was wrong about Carson Wentz. And I'm not saying this because I want a pat on the back or a cookie, even though I do like oatmeal raisin cookies. I'm saying this because Carson Wentz has proven time and time again in 2020 that he is not learning from his mistakes, that he is not putting his team in the best position to be successful, because he continues to think that he is better than he is. You know, Carson Wentz claims to be a Christian, and he does a lot of charity work for people with churches and other countries. But Carson Wentz would be very, very, very needy of rechecking out a verse in the Bible that says pride becomes for a fall. Well, Carson is falling right now because he's let his pride get in the way of doing what's right. Maybe the next time Carson Wentz has a Bible study, someone needs to pull out that verse and make him repeat it about 5 times. Because he can say all he wants after the game. I got to do a better job. I got to make better throws. But actions speak louder than words, my friends. And if your actions are in complete contrast to your words, doesn't matter. Now, if you want to say that the one interception, the John Hightower, the wind grabbed it and moved it around, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about it. I still think it was a bad throw. Because anybody in their right mind who was on that field should have seen how the wind was blowing and should have seen the wind was affecting everything. Kicks, punts, throws, everything. The first fumble was completely Wentz's fault. He should have thrown the ball away, but instead, he wants to make a play. He wants to be a hero because his pride is getting in the way. And on a team sport, when you have pride and you fall into egotistical tendencies because you want to make a play, you want to be a hero, you want to do this and do that, you're not just going to fail, but your team is going to fail. And if it wasn't for the Eagles' defense on Sunday Night Football, and if it wasn't for Boston Scott having a very good game, by the way, he averaged almost 5 yards a carry on 15 carries, the Philadelphia Eagles probably would have lost to Ben DiNucci and the Ocean City High School Red Raiders coaching staff calling plays out there. Because I feel like every play I saw the Cowboys play that was not a conventional NFL play last night, I've seen in a high school football game in South Jersey. The Eagles defense did an impressive job at staying at home on a lot of plays last night, including Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox and TJ Edwards. I mean, you talk about a guy coming back from an injury and having an impact. Can we talk about TJ Edwards? I'm not saying one game should make a guy's career, but I think one game at least solidifies the need for this young man to be in the lineup each and every game, and Nate Gary can go take a long walk on a short pier. TJ Edwards had 6 solo tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for a loss, and a quarterback hit. He was everywhere. He was incredible last night. By the way, Fletcher Cox, the stats might not be gaudy, but man, was he disruptive. Man, was he making an impact on that game. The stat line will tell you 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss, 3 total tackles. But what the stat line won't tell you was what my eyes told me, which was he was disrupting the entire Cowboys offense. So was Brandon Graham. They were both getting pressure again and again and again on the Cowboys offense and their young quarterback, who I think was trying to be fancy half the time with his sidearm throws and whatever else he thought he was doing. The win was thanks to the defense. I know there's a group of people out there who don't want to give credit to the defense because of the fact that there's a certain group of people who just hate Jim Schwartz, don't want to give him credit if their life depended on it. But I'm telling you right now, if the Eagles defense wasn't run by Jim Schwartz and didn't have TJ Edwards and Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, and how about Will Parks? His name's on the trade block. He had some great plays last night. Jalen Mills had some really good plays last night. Alex Singleton was flying all over the football field. Vinny Curry was making plays last night. The Eagles' defense won them the game. In a very similar manner to how they won the game for them in the playoff run to the Super Bowl over the Falcons. That was also at home. That was also at night. So as much as I'm frustrated with Carson Wentz, I am equally impressed with the play of the Philadelphia Eagles defense here on a Monday day after. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board 609-403-0973. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Still to come on the show, we got Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports jumping on to talk some NFL and college football, plus some accountability time for Josh. Another winning weekend. So we had one losing weekend a few weeks ago and now 3 straight winning weekends. So we have now vaulted the overall record to 38-23. We'll get into those picks a little bit later in the hour. But if you want to text in, you can always get on the conversation at 609-403-0973. On the PlaySugarHouse.com, text board 609-403-0973. Text chimes in, says, thanks for mentioning oatmeal raisin cookies, Josh. Now I got to stop for Little Debbie's. Well, see, that's where I got to disagree with you, Texter. Because I'm a homemade oatmeal raisin cookie guy. To me, nothing beats the homemade oatmeal raisin cookie. And the only thing that gets close if you go to your local bakery. Outside of those two things, no offense to Little Debbie, but Little Debbie don't got anything on homemade oatmeal raisin cookies. Because when you make a homemade oatmeal raisin cookie, you can go a little crazy with the ingredients. You could throw in a couple of extra raisins, maybe some extra oatmeal, maybe get creative and throw in there some applesauce or maybe some extra banana, or get a little creative and throw in there maybe some nuts like some macadamians or some cashews or something. You know, you make a diversified homemade batch. It's like opening up Forrest Gump, right? Open up a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. Well, if you make a diversified homemade cookie batch, you never know what you're going to get from each cookie. It could be anything. And by the way, a lot of those store brands, they are made with things that people have allergies for. So if you have allergies, like if you're lactose intolerant, you're nut intolerance, or whatever it may be, you know, maybe you have allergies that are affected by food. You make the cookies at home. You can customize the batter for the cookie so it doesn't affect your allergies. So there you go. I talked more about oatmeal raisin cookies today than I ever expected to on a Monday, day after an Eagles win in a bizarre game on Sunday Night Football. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. And one more thing before we hit the break. I do got to highlight also how great it was to see Jalen Reagor, I should say, back on the field last night. I know he only had 3 catches and the 1 touchdown, but the 2 of the plays that he had when he did catch the ball, and the ball was catchable, by the way. I know he had 6 targets, but probably 2 of those targets weren't actually catchable balls. So I'm not even fully sure why they count as targets, but the one play where he catches the ball and he stops in his tracks and makes the guy fly by and then runs to the first down. And then the second one when they use him in motion and he catches the touchdown on the sweep across. I mean, this guy is special. I'm so thrilled that this team got this guy, because now you got this electric weapon across from Travis Fulgham, who's just old, reliable. Another touchdown, another 6 catches, another 78 yards, ho-hum, just another day at the office for Travis Fulgham. You got 2 bona fide, legitimate receivers. And I was going to tweet this out, but I realized that 240 characters is not enough for this. Can we stop comparing Jalen Reagor to Deshaun Jackson? Jalen Reagor is a stronger, more powerful human being than D-Jax. Deshaun Jackson, when he came into the league, if he was 170 pounds it was probably with all of the equipment on. Jalen Reagor is a solid 205, 208. I mean, the dude's got power in those quads. He's got some thickness in the arms. Deshaun Jackson's just a lean speed machine. So I'm getting a little tired of people comparing him to Deshaun Jackson. First of all, he's not as fast as D-Jax. D-Jax probably in his prime was running a 4.28 in his sleep. Reagor runs in a 4.3 range. Second of all, Rager's more powerful. He's a better jumper. He's a more dynamic athlete than D-Jax is. So for me, I'm going to say, it's a little unfair to compare him to Deshaun Jackson. All right, folks, keep the text coming, 609-403-0973. Joey D. and Ventnor, I see your your text jumping in there on the text board. We'll get to that coming up just a little bit later in the show. But right now, we got to hear a word from the sponsors and get ready for Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports joining us on the other side right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to the text board in just a bit at 609-403-0973. But joining us right now on the Boardwalk kind of hotline, he is Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Covers the NFL as well as college football and the NFL draft. And as all guests, he appears on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Eric, how you doing on this Monday?
I'm doing all right. What's going on?
Not too much. So I want to get your perspective because you've seen the college game, you've seen the NFL game, and for a lot of people right now in this area, there's a lot of discussion about a lot of things in the NFL and the college football, but I want to start with the atrocity that we saw last night on Sunday Night Football. You know, Carson Wentz is in year 5, and he's making rookie mistakes. He's staring down receivers. He's trying to be a hero. I call it, him getting his ego out of whack. So for you, as someone who watches the NFL, watches college football, what are your impressions of Carson Wentz at this point in his career? I mean, it's year 5, but he's making mistakes like he's a rookie.
Yeah, year 5, you expect a different level of performance. You expect, statistically, or at least fantasy football-wise, he'd been fairly productive, but the eye test tells you a different story. And for 3 quarters last night, you really couldn't tell a huge difference between the year 5 number 2 pick in the draft and the year 1 7th rounder in Ben DiNucci. Now, it wasn't exactly a level playing field. I get it, but facing that Cowboys defense that has been, hit with injury, has been ineffective, one of the worst, groups in the NFL, probably statistically the worst if you take a factor in everything. And it's frustrating. I get it. Even with everything the Eagles have faced, I still don't know that there are very many excuses to where you say, hey, why are we still holding on to the ball and not protecting it when you are getting hit? Why are we doing those things that you mentioned as well? It just sort of feels like, whatever plays he makes that are unscripted, that are the improvisational ones, get negated by not making the fundamental plays that every franchise quarterback has to be hitting on about 95% of the time.
We see in other places around the league that it's not just the Eagles. There's some poor quarterback play around the league. I mean, the Vikings are lucky to win the game yesterday because of Dalvin Cook. Kirk Cousins had a rough year. In Chicago, the whole situation with, Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. So, is Carson Wentz's rough play on par with what we're seeing around the league, or is it unique?
I think it's kind of in its own category. I mean, obviously we have the high end guys, who are almost unassailable in what they're doing in Patrick Mahomes, probably, Russell Wilson, even with Wilson's, disappointing game against the Cardinals last week. I mean, he's everybody has one of those once in a while. It's not an every week occurrence. Russell has shown the ability to, bring teams back. We know how good Deshaun Watson is under normal circumstances. Yeah, Josh Allen's leveled off, but, look at what Tom Brady's doing in Tampa. We'll get a look at him tonight. And, obviously look at Teddy Bridgewater's surprising season and what he's done so far. I mean, without Christian McCaffrey for more than half the year. So, for every example of an uncomfortable or an awkward quarterback situation or a starter who's not performing at the level expected, there's the bright spots of Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. There's the Bridgewater example. There's Matt Ryan leading the league in passing yards with, on a team that, that's sort of been held together by sticks and glue. So it's every situation is unique, but overall I would say the quarterbacking is as good as it's ever been, even with, those situations that we pointed out.
There's a contingent of people who want to say, bench Wentz, put Jalen Hurts in there. I mean, I think it's ridiculous, but in your eyes, is there a level of play that would garner Wentz to maybe not be in there? Because like I said, in Chicago, Mitch Trubisky was winning games, probably not because of himself, but because of the defense. So we've seen around the league guys get benched for other players. Obviously, each situation is unique. So is there a level of play of Wentz playing so bad that even you would say, as a objective person, you might want to give Jalen Hurts a shot and put Wentz on the bench?
It's hard to know this year, especially because we didn't really see Jalen Hurts drop back, read the field, make plays in the preseason. Normally we have at least a barometer of where they are. You remember when Lamar Jackson came out, and I don't think they're the same player or anything, but I'm just using him as an example. His rookie year, I believe the Ravens had 5 preseason games. I think they were in the Hall of Fame game that year, if memory serves. They played Lamar a ton. I think he had like 167 dropbacks in the preseason or something like that. And he was a mixed bag. He was up and down. And so that role that they kind of stuck him in as sort of a decoy, a 1 or 2 play package guy, every now and then he'd flash a little burst, but he never got to get in the flow of the game. And so, it's kind of hard to judge Jalen Hurts. I would suppose that if the division is at risk of slipping away and they feel that Carson is directly responsible for that, meaning we would have won had he not thrown 3 picks, or, we win that game against the division rival if he doesn't cough it up on the goal line or whatever the situation may be, then you consider it. But Jalen Hurts so far, what have we seen from him? We've seen little plays here and there that are designed toward his strengths and maybe away from his weaknesses. And we haven't seen anything close to the full package. So whatever's happened in practice, really only the 50 plus guys on the roster and Doug Peterson and the rest of the offensive staff really truly know how far Hurts is and whether he's even close to an upgrade at this point over Wentz.
Eric Edholm joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN Yahoo Sports. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Eric, I did want to touch on with you also about the Chicago situation, because 2 straight games now, Nick Foles has played probably just almost as rocky as Carson Wentz is. And I know the situation in Chicago is different, especially with Mitch Trubisky back there. But there's a lot of Eagle fans who sit there and say, well, the Eagles should have kept Nick Foles. They'd be better off. But I think the evidence is in the pudding that Nick Foles, whether it's Jacksonville or Chicago, he hasn't exactly been Super Bowl Nick Foles either after the run in 2017.
Yeah, what we need is a 4-5 playoff game, Bears at Eagles, right? Foles at Wentz to decide who the better quarterback is for their respective teams. Because we may get it. I mean, obviously we know the situation with the NFC East. The Bears have a very respectable record at 5-3. They don't look the part otherwise, but yeah, I mean, on a throw-by-throw basis, Trubisky was actually better in his 2+ games than Foles has been for 3+ games now. So do you go back to him? Does Matt Nagy make that call? Has he completely nuked the confidence of Trubisky after what's happened the last year and a half? I don't know. I really don't. I mean, I really thought heading into last season, the Bears were in a pretty good place with Trubisky. I didn't think he'd ever be great. I think we'd seen that he had a very defined ceiling, but I thought, he played pretty well against the Eagles in that playoff game. He wasn't bad. He wasn't terrible, I don't think. Last year just set everything back so far. I think he just sort of suffered some irreparable damages there, and I don't really truly know what he can give them. But would it be stunning if they went back to Trubisky? At this point, I don't think so. It depends on Nick taking fewer sacks, He's hit a few long balls the last couple games, but it hasn't just been as consistent as you'd like to see. And, yeah, it's getting to the point where nobody knows who the best quarterback is in Chicago.
How much do you buy into the theory, whether it's legitimate or not? You tell me what you think about, well, Matt Nagy wasn't part of the people who scouted and drafted Mitch Trubisky, and that has a lot to do with the chaos that's going on in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't his handpicked guy for sure. And then, Nagy was part of the Kansas City team that identified the traits that they saw in Mahomes, who, at the time was, I think, most people's quarterback 3 in the media. The sort of the outside the NFL. It's hard to get a real genuine answer from some teams on that matter, but there were teams that really liked Mahomes. There were some that had questions. Hey, can that style work, for every team? I don't know that he would be the superstar he is if he didn't have Andy Reid and Tyreek Hill and everything else that they have in Kansas City. But to bring it back to your Bears question, I suspect that Matt Nagy wasn't in love with Trubisky coming out. I think he thought that, there was some skill there, but why did he sit on the bench behind Marquise Williams for 2 years at North Carolina, who was a guy who spent a little time in Packers camp and has never sniffed an NFL regular season field? That was a big question for a lot of people in the scouting community. Why did it take him so long to get on the field at North Carolina? So I suspect there may have been some of that, bouncing around in Nagy's brain a little bit.
Just kind of one more NFL question before I hit on a little college football with you, Eric. At this point in time, we saw the Steelers get another huge win. Week 1, the week before it was the Titans, and then this past week it was the Ravens. Are the Steelers definitively the number 2 team in the AFC now?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously, a very battle-tested team the last 2 weeks. You see what they've been, what they've done against the better competition than what they saw, the first chunk of the season. Kansas City, I think is who you're alluding to, obviously, is the team that probably scares more people, so to speak.
Yep.
Ben Roethlisberger has been a little bit limited what he's been able to do this year, but boy, it's a whole heck of a lot better than what they had at quarterback last year. Does Devin Bush's absence explain why the Ravens ran for 265 yards with 2 backup offensive linemen? You'd never say that one person means that much to a defense, but it certainly was a gaping absence in that game. So there are holes on this team that can't be explained away completely, but there's a certain grit and determination about them and a kind of a big moment mentality they have that you can't ignore either. I like them a lot. I mean, the Bills have fallen off a little. The Titans, can look shaky. Maybe come playoff time, they're a little more sturdy. Ravens are still going to be in the mix, but there may not be that one other team in the AFC that anyone is actually frightened of. So I think right now, given what we've seen, that's a fair assessment.
I wanted to ask you to college football with you because a couple things happened over the weekend that were kind of eye-popping, but I want to start with what you wrote about at Yahoo Sports. You talked about one of the winners of the draft is Zach Wilson right now, and I think 2020 is going to be a fascinating experiment in evaluation because Wilson isn't playing the typical BYU schedule. It's kind of like a piece-together schedule. And when you compare him to a guy who is also among those guys who are, that group right after Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, along with Trey Lance of San Diego State, who had one game, and I don't even know what you could read into that one game, honestly. It was more like more like a spring practice, it felt like, than anything. But, Zach Wilson is going to be an interesting experiment to me. No offense to him, but in, how are people going to look at a quarterback who he's got more of a sample size, but that sample size is against maybe not the best competition?
Yeah, and we'll have a little bit of a clearer picture after Friday. I believe Friday they play Boise State, who's going to be, they're ranked. They're one of the best teams. They're probably the best team and the best defense they'll face all season. But absolutely correct to point out that other than Boise, I don't see a good defense on their slate. Now, maybe obviously they get one more game against a quality opponent. But, yeah, I mean, with him, it's really interesting to look back. He was a freshman phenom. We really had some moments where you said, whoa, this kid is good. I mean, he was special. Was he more of a runaround guy than he is now? Yes. Last year had a hand injury and a shoulder injury, shoulder off-season surgery. didn't look the same, but he still led him to two big upsets in the first 2 weeks of the season at Neyland Stadium. A couple of big wins that I think were nice feathers in his cap, even though he wasn't full strength. This year, he's put it all together. Yes, he can move. He's an active guy. You see him throw passes, and it kind of makes you think, is that Mahomes? Is that Aaron Rodgers? Is there something really, truly special here? He's got some work to do. And, Saturday wasn't his best game, but I put him at number 6 in my first mock draft last week, and a lot of people are like, number 6? Are you kidding? This is about the time a year ago where Joe Burrow was considered maybe a late first rounder, that sort of top 25 possibly. Look, quarterbacks, they rise up boards fast. The need is there. Teams want to invest in talent and find potential starters anywhere they can, but they go quickly. So I think Wilson, even though he hasn't had that great test this year, is going to end up going very high unless his season just goes in the tank from here on out.
At least for me, I would definitely take him ahead of Jamie Newman because Newman's not even playing this year. Kellen Mond has been erratic at Texas A&M. Purdy, I don't know what to think of him anymore at Iowa State. And, of course, Sam Ehlinger, he feels like more of a college quarterback than a pro quarterback at this point. So I feel like, maybe Wilson really is the number 3 guy because, again, with Lance, no offense to him, but we have a limited sample size.
Right. And that's kind of what I hinted at today is that, look, Trey Lance, through no fault of his own, he obviously could have come back to school had he wanted to. He could have played in the spring, assuming that the FCS season still happens when it's scheduled for. But there was so much buzz around him in that redshirt freshman year last year. Like you said, the one-game showcase thing they had against Central Arkansas, he looked rusty. Everybody looked rusty. It was kind of one of those games. His talent, shone through eventually. But I unless Trey Lance's individual workouts are spectacular, he's going to have a hard time replicating the body of work that Wilson and Fields would have done over the last couple of seasons, especially. And Wilson would have been a 3-year starter. So, yeah, that's what you lose by coming out early and having 17 college starts. In some of those playoff games last year for North Dakota State, he was throwing the ball 10, 15 times because they were running the heck out of the ball. And you're trying to win games. It's not the FCS is not a developmental NFL quarterback league. So, I understand why their team was doing that, but that's going to raise some serious concerns for NFL teams, even if Trey Lance is, immensely talented. There's that doubt out there about, hey, how much has he really done? What exactly are we putting our money on here?
One more for you, Eric, and I appreciate your time. The other interesting test case for 2020 being 2020 is, and I've talked about it a bunch of times here on Football Fridays, is Rondale Moore at Purdue. 2 straight weeks, He's suspiciously not around. He opted back into the season to play. There's rumors out there that he hurt himself in an incident outside of playing football, and that's why he's not available, and the team doesn't want to tell anybody about it because they don't want to get him in trouble or anything like that. So, it feels like for someone like him, he's another interesting test case because he was someone who was supposed to be boosting his stock right now, and instead he's been MIA for 2 weeks.
Yeah, if anyone can remember Rondale Moore in 2018 when he was a true freshman, anyone who watched Purdue's upset of Ohio State, beat him by 18 or 19 points under the lights, Moore was spectacular that game, and he really didn't have a bad game his freshman year. He was incredible to the point where people are saying, is this one of the best 5'9" wide receivers in college football history, or could he be? After 4 games last year, gets hurt. He was off to a great start. When he opted out, I kind of thought, "Ooh, this is a risk," because boy, he's had 180 offensive snaps since the end of the 18 season. NFL folks are going to have a little bit of a doubt about that. Anytime there's an absence of on-field evidence, the tape, they're going to have their questions. So when he opted back in, I was excited. Now this, what you just said, the mysterious circumstances, is it some incident that we're not aware of? I've poked around, haven't gotten very far on that one yet. We'll just have to wait and see. So far they say we want him back. We're going to be excited when he's eligible to play, but his teammate, David Bell, has picked up the slack and been great through 2 weeks. So hard to know. It's a very tricky test case right there.
For more NFL and college football analysis, as well as the NFL draft, go follow Eric on Twitter at Eric_Edholm and check out his stuff over at Yahoo Sports, the website and the app. and as all guests, he appeared here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Eric, always appreciate the time and the conversation.
You got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Josh Hennig, you're on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. 609-403-0973 is theplaysugarhouse.com. Text board will get to your text. Coming up next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig, you're on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Thanks again, Eric Edholm, for the insight. You get to the text board now. Of course, PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Place your legal sports bet to PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and the match the first deposit up to $250. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Joey D. and Bentner chimes in and says, Josh, I agree 100%. The turning point was Brandon Graham's strip sack, and the Cowboys were likely going to score. Offense was constipated all night. That's funny. Frustrating win. Win's a win, though. Well, first of all, let's go to the end. See, as Dominic Toretto would say, doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning. We're not going to complain if the Eagles have a playoff run because they barely beat the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football on November 1st. But I'm still concerned about the play of Carson Wentz. I don't think we give the defense enough credit. Brandon Graham, Vinny Curry, Fletcher Cox, they all had monster games last night. And T.J. Edwards was everywhere. Alex Singleton was flying over the field. Rodney McLeod, Jalen Mills, they both did very good games. The cornerback play was a little questionable at times, but you were able to get away with some of it because of the fact that Ben DiNucci was back there and it wasn't a legitimate NFL quarterback. So, when you think about the Eagles, I don't think we're going to give the defense enough credit. I know there's some people who hate Jim Schwartz and will never give him credit, but I'm definitely going to give them credit. And I think that, if anybody deserves a game ball after last night, it was Brandon Graham, it was Fletcher Cox, it was Vinny Curry, it was Jim Schwartz, it was the whole defense doing their job. At least one side of the defense can get the job done, unlike the starting quarterback of the Eagles. And listen, Wentz wasn't all bad. Wentz threw 2 touchdowns. They were both very good passes. But just because you have a couple good plays doesn't take away from the bad plays. And, as Deshaun and I were talking about on Sports Bash Saturday, you have to be honest about Wentz. If you're going to critique one person, you got to critique everybody. And Wentz falls into that conversation for sure. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Dan from Tuckerton chimes in and says, Bill O'Brien, great coach, but his GM skills got him fired. Doug Peterson's also a great coach. His offensive coordinator skills are going to get him fired. That's Dan at Tuckerton. Well, first of all, I don't think Peterson's anywhere close to being fired. I think that conjecture, easy for me to say, is a little bit, far-fetched. Because number one, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with his organization, and the organization will always be indebted to him. And number two, you can't blame Doug Peterson for Wentz making not 1, not 2, but 3 horrible decisions on the football field last night. Listen, I was tweeting up a storm last night. Doug Peterson's play calling was ineffective. It was not creative. It was stale. It was stagnant. Whatever adjective you want to use, it falls into that category. But that play calling would have maybe not looked so bad if his quarterback wasn't just so ridiculous. And I think if anybody goes sooner than later, Carson Wentz is going to be the first to go. 100%. Because Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson were both handpicked by Jeffrey Lurie. Jeffrey Lurie's always been Howie Roseman's corner. And he's going to give Howie Roseman every chance to succeed or fail. And Doug Peterson comes from the Andy Reid tree, and Andy Reid whether you believe the reports or not, recommended the Eagles interview Doug Peterson, and I think the Eagles will give Doug Peterson every chance to succeed or fail. But I think Wentz is the shortest leash because the organization looks at the quarterback position as a position that, look, they had Nick Foles win the Super Bowl. Ron Jaworski got them to another Super Bowl in 1980. Donovan McNabb got them to another one. So they've had 3 different quarterbacks starting in 3 different Super Bowls in 3 different eras with 3 different head coaches. So to me, I think that the quarterback position, at least track record-wise, is more likely to get shuffled than any other position. I'm not saying cut Wentz, trade Wentz. I'm not saying any of that garbage. I'm just telling you, I think Wentz is lower on the favored status, shall we call it, than Doug Peterson. And you know what? Maybe there's something to be said for the fact that Doug Peterson might be better off with a different quarterback. All right, accountability time for Josh. I mentioned we had a winning weekend, 5-2. That's pretty good. Well, first of all, it's the second straight week. One of those losses. Numerous players for Temple did not play yesterday due to COVID, and right before the game, they announced that Anthony Russo was not going to play. So Temple didn't just miss the over. They barely scored any points yet on Saturday. So that's 2 straight weeks now that I've been hit by the players been ruled out before the game bug. The week before was NC State. Now this week it's Temple. So that came back to bite me. But we did get a winner. Boston College plus 24.5. They lost by 6. That was a great play. Hope you guys grabbed on that play. LSU at Auburn plus 2 is another win we had on Saturday. I told you guys that was 12. Now 13 straight meetings. The home team has covered. Auburn won convincingly over LSU on Saturday. Rutgers did not cover the spread. Listen, they shot themselves in the foot in the second quarter. If you were watching the game or listening to it here on 97.3 ESPN, the 2 turnovers and the poor play in the second quarter doomed them. They never had a chance to beat Indiana from that point on. So, listen, they went down. They tried to get back into the game and later in the game in the third and fourth quarters, but it just wasn't enough. Indiana is just a better team. Northwestern, I told you to pick them outright. They were a plus 2.5. Well, we barely got that one. They won 21-20. They were down 17-3 at one point early in the, I think it was midway through the second quarter, but they stormed back. Listen, I like this quarterback. This quarterback, Ramsey, he's got some talent. He's got some ability. I don't know if he's going to be an NFL prospect, but he's a nice college quarterback. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's got some moxie on him. Keep an eye on Northwestern. Navy at SMU over 59. Boy, they hit that in a landslide. The total was around 80 in that game. Listen, I knew SMU was going to want to make a comeback and prove that they're still a legitimate contender in the AAC. Well, they did in flying colors. And the final game we hit, I was worried about this game. I'm thinking, man, one game over. But Arkansas with the backdoor cover, they score with under a minute to go. It was originally a blowout for Texas A&M. That was a backdoor cover. So if you had the 13.5 for Arkansas, you were having a good weekend. 5-2 over the weekend. We're now 38-23. Keep it tuned for more college football picks a little bit later in the week here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Josh Hennig. Speaking of picks, I think the Bucs win big today. Brady's going to take apart that Giants defense. You can hear it next on 97.3 ESPN.